Hello everyone, my name's Dr. Jack Shepherd. I'm a lecturer in tourism studies at Mid Sweden University, and I'll be coming to the Eurovisions conference in Basel this year, where I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible there. So I'm originally from the UK. I moved to Sweden in 2015 to switch from studying history and French to studying tourism studies. I finished my PhD 3 years ago, where I was looking at the relationship between tourism and peace building in Israel-Palestine. And as part of that work, I conducted a large study on the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest in Tel Aviv, looking at why Eurovision fans chose not to boycott the event and to travel to Israel. And as part of that, I was conducting data collection in Tel Aviv, which is where this picture was taken. And I think it was really at this point that my love for Eurovision blossomed from kind of a personal interest to a research interest. I had such great time meeting all the fans in Tel Aviv, and honestly, I was quite overwhelmed by the response to the survey that I put on EurovisionWorld.com, which got over 2,000 responses. So I really want to thank anyone who took part in that who might be watching this. Since then, Eurovision has continued to be a research interest of mine. So together with an Australian colleague who also loves the event, we are releasing a book on Eurovision and its relationships to events, leisure, and tourism studies. We have several of the contributors in that book here at the conference, and I myself have written on topics such as Eurovision's relationship to war, the experiences of host cities, for example, Malmö last year, and tourism development in the Icelandic town of Húsavík in the shadow of the Fire Saga movie, which I'm very pleased to see has got new life with both the Icelandic and the British entries to Eurovision visiting Húsavík this year. So if I crack on, my work on war is really what led me to this presentation today. War has always been a part of Eurovision. So when the contest began in 1956, France was deeply embroiled in a war in Algeria. And since we have seen not only colonial wars and wars as part of the so-called war on terror outside Europe, we've also seen conflict in Europe in Yugoslavia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, or Northern Ireland and Ukraine. And what I discovered when I was working and looking into this relationship was that war did not really affect the contest greatly until about 2022. So if you look at voting patterns, one cannot really see any correlation between being at war and not doing well at the contest. In fact, several countries reached the top 3 in the contest despite fighting gruesome wars. So we might look at Russia and Chechnya in 2000 or Israel and Lebanon in 1982. Although we do start to see some evidence of war interfering in the contest during the Yugoslav wars, there is a significant change in 2022. And I think that these two cases are quite interesting to look at. We have, on the one hand, Bosnia's 1993 entry with Fazla, who, despite escaping Sarajevo and the siege there, basically on bare foot to make it to the Eurovision and sing a very moving song about the war, they only came 16th. Whereas if you think of Kalush Orchestra in 2022, a slightly similar story, also singing a song about the war, they were sailed to first place. So we're seeing that war is increasingly having a noticeable impact on the contest. And I would argue that the increasing presence of war in the contest is a threat to its longevity. This threat is not militaristic, although we have seen the Eurovision arena be threatened by military actors, both in Tel Aviv in 2019 and in Turin in 2022. Instead, I would argue that the threat stems more from the contest's seeming inability to adequately address a paradox that has long been present and highlighted, but which becomes all the more obvious during times of war. This paradox is the idea that the Eurovision Song Contest claims to believe in universality, while simultaneously it claims to celebrate liberal values such as equality and inclusivity, values that are intimately tied to the brand culture co-created between the contest's organizers and its fan base. Participating countries that are at war highlight this paradox and create difficult situations for the contest to manage, placing the contest in a bind between sticking to its admissions policy or excluding warring countries on the basis that they do not represent the contest's values. So maybe we should look a little bit further at this difference between the universalism and liberalism that we find in the event. So on the one hand, the Eurovision Song Contest is certainly a universal event. It's an event of broadcasters, not of nations. In order to therefore participate, a country does not necessarily need to approve, but rather its broadcaster seeks to have membership in the European Broadcast Union. To be a member of the EBU, you need to be a member of the International Telecommunications Union and be located in the European Broadcasting Area. So in other words, there's not really any litmus test of values in order to be in the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, if the EBU had used its own values of universality, independence, excellence, diversity, accountability, and innovation onto the Eurovision Song Contest, perhaps I would not have to be making this presentation. The issue has arisen because the Eurovision Song Contest has different stated values to its parent organization, including the values of equality and inclusivity. Now, the Eurovision Song Contest's association with liberal values is partly due to its association with the European political project and due to the pressure that mega events are facing to appear to care for issues like human rights. But I would argue that the most significant factor is the co-creation of the Eurovision brand with fans over the last 3 decades that has turned this from a song contest into a festival of peace and love, particularly supported by the LGBTQ+ community. And here it's interesting to look at the work of branding scholar Sarah Burnett-Weiser, who explains that brands are more than an economic strategy. They are also a cultural space in which individuals feel safe, secure, relevant, and authentic. Over time, Eurovision has come to become such a cultural space for the LGBTQ+ community. And I can recommend the work of scholar Catherine Baker, who has looked at this in far more detail than I have. But LGBTQ+ visibility and the broader idea of sexual freedom has become such a large part of the contest that the Eurovision cannot really ignore this segment of their fan base anymore. The same can be said for the notion of the Eurovision as a celebration of peace. Although this was not its intended aim, over time, many people have come to associate the contest with peace, whether that be in parody forms such as Pietra Mierda and Måns Zelmerlöw's Peace, Peace, Love, Love at the 2016 event, or the decision to start the 22 Turin event with John Lennon's Give Peace a Chance by the Rocking 1000. Of course, it's also evident in the slogans like the permanent one now that we have, United by Music. So I think the values of inclusivity and equality are a recognition by the EBU of these new acquired, co-created values of the contest. Now, the problem is that these values don't always match. Paradoxes are an integral part of mega events. The universalism paradox is a classic one and refers to the fact that mega events like the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup, they all aspire to unite people as one human race, while they simultaneously are organized along national divisions and reinforce the national with anthems and flags. For the most part, this and other paradoxes of mega events are workable, but at times they start to become unworkable. In Eurovision's case, the celebration of the event as one of sexual freedom and queer visibility has meant that its fan base continue to support it, while other countries such as Turkey and Hungary have withdrawn from the event for fear of being too closely associated with the liberal values they don't really want to support. On the flip side of the coin, the maintenance of the event's universal membership meant that countries like Russia and Azerbaijan have been able to host the event over the years, despite not having any protections whatsoever for the queer community. Interestingly, therefore, maintaining both the universal membership and liberal values mean that very different groups feel that their social capital might be at risk by being associated with the Eurovision Song Contest. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 presented one such unworkable moment for the Eurovision Song Contest. Initially, the European Broadcast Union decided to maintain its stance of the event as a non-political event, and therefore participation. You can see that here in the first quote. that the Eurovision Song Contest is a non-political cultural event that unites countries and celebrates diversity through music. The problem was that the national broadcasters were horrified by the prospect of Russia participating, as they saw it as breaching the values of the event, and therefore, of course, by invading another country. This led to a panicked turnaround by the EBU, who switched from promoting the rulebook to promoting the liberal values of the event, in justifying Russia's expulsion from the contest. Clearly, although many European broadcasters must have, breathed a big sigh of relief that Russia was not going to be in the contest, the decision is not without controversy or risk. A precedent was set that the liberal values of the song contest may mean more than the technocratic rulebook. Ultimately, if countries could now be banned for going to war, who could be next? And this is a question that became all the more pressing when Israel once again went to war against Gaza in 2023. As many of you know, Israel has been a member of Eurovision since 1973 and has won the contest on 2 occasions. Israel's hosting of the event in 2019 was perhaps its most controversial, and was threatened by a concerted boycott attempt by the Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Movement, who argued that artists, broadcasters, viewers and tourists should boycott the event as a reaction to Israel's ongoing military occupation of the Palestinians. I think it would not be unfair to say that this boycott failed, and the show went ahead as normal except for 1 or 2 minor protest actions. The question about Israel's participation really got attention, however, I would say, following the Hamas attacks of October 7th and the Israeli military response on Gaza that followed. In 2024, there was once again a concerted effort for Israel to be removed from the event and for a boycott to be enacted. This was, of course, mostly due to the ongoing military action and its consequences in Gaza, but also due to the perception that Israel was seeking to use its participation in the event to garner sympathy and to distract from its military action and possible war crimes in Gaza, something that some scholars have referred to as song washing. The EBU clearly agreed, at least with the idea that Israel was trying to politicize the event, and forced their entry, Eden Golan, to change the lyrics of her submission, October Rain, which later became Hurricane. However, the EBU was very clear, like they were initially with Russia, that the Eurovision is a non-political event, and that Can, the broadcaster, the Israeli broadcaster, met all the necessary rules and requirements to take part. The rulebook approach is what carried the day for the EBU throughout the contest, and again, despite some chaos behind the scenes, including Eden Golan being essentially forced to hide in her hotel room, or feeling forced to hide in her hotel room for the entire event, Israel's participation went without a glitch. And then in 2025, we've seen almost exactly the same trend. As with previous years, we see a call for boycott, petitions from artists and cultural figures, particularly in countries like Sweden, Finland, and Iceland, and local activists accusing Eurovision of collaborating with war criminals. So we are almost seeing a repeat of 2024. But I think this year was slightly more serious. I would say that this year we've been seeing calls from broadcasters, we've been seeing calls from European politicians that really say we need to think more about Israel's participation in the event. Slovenia, Iceland, and Spain have formally requested the EBU to open a discussion about Israel's participation, and a group of European parliamentarians have written to the EBU demanding Israel's exclusion from the event. What's interesting, at least for this work, is that these broadcasters have called upon the liberal values of the event to ask for Israel's exclusion. In arguing for a debate on Israel's participation, Spain's RTVE said that Eurovision always upheld the values of freedom, peace, and human rights, while the parliamentarians wrote that to preserve its integrity, the EBU must act decisively and immediately to uphold its values of peace, cooperation, human dignity, and public accountability. The EBU's response to this, once again, was to hide in the rule book bunker. In response to the parliamentarians, the EBU said that participation in the event is extended to all EBU member broadcasters. The Israeli broadcaster Kan is a full and active member of the EBU and is therefore eligible to take part. Interestingly, they also point out that Kan is regularly threatened with defunding by the Netanyahu government and therefore cannot be seen as a mouthpiece for the Israeli regime. So I thought we might ponder, how do we work our way out of this seemingly, Gordian knot of, on the one hand, having these, a rule book that really allows for universal membership, whilst at the same time claiming to have liberal values. Regardless of what side you may sit on the fence of this issue, it's fairly clear that this clash between caring for the event's universality and freedom from politics, and caring for the event's connections to being a festival of love and peace that cares for the world and the people in it, is unsustainable. Israel's participation in the event means that while the EBU can maintain its universalist membership, we have to ask at what cost. I'm just one person, and I know of many people who refuse to watch the event because they are horrified that Israel continues to participate despite what the International Criminal Court has labelled as plausible genocide going on under Israeli watch. So what are the options to deal with this? So option one, I would argue, would be to stick to the rulebook and stop promoting the event as one that has liberal values. This would mean that Eurovision goes back to being simply a music event with no higher ambitions. This would certainly make the inclusion of Israel and other states that have been at war more reasonable, but it would clash with the brand that Eurovision has co-created for itself as a festival of peace and love. Option two would be to do the opposite, and that's to take their liberal values very seriously and to ditch their universal membership. This would certainly make the contest slogan and performance of unity and peace less hollow, but it would run the risk of the contest losing support, as countries might wonder who is next to be banned or cancelled for the event for not meeting the liberal value litmus test that the EBU might seek to impose. There is an option three, which won't really please either side truly, but which is more of a middle way. And this is to create an agora and to leverage the event's peace-building potential. What do I mean by this? So an agora is the ancient Greek term for an open forum where lively discussion and debate could take place. In their drive to stick to the rulebook and to maintain the focus on music, the EBU has silenced artists who have reservations about Israel's participation, and they have been ghosting broadcasters who wish for open debate. I think this damages the EBU's credibility and goes against their own stated values of accountability. There is a scenario where instead artists, broadcasters, and others involved in the event would be allowed to speak freely on any topic. This does not mean that any country needs to be banned, but rather that in the agora all are welcome and all are welcome to express themselves and their thoughts on these issues. The right to critique and question values would, after all, be a central European tenet from the Enlightenment worth celebrating. And then concerning leveraging, well, leveraging initiatives are activities that take place around an event itself to maximize the long-term benefit from events. I think the ESC does have undeniable power to bring people together, but its connection to ongoing conflicts is swept under the rug. The contest could leverage its unifying potential by promoting initiatives connected to ongoing conflicts. There are good examples of how this was done at the 2023 event in Liverpool. So in this case, one great example could be if Eurovision supported or paid the West East Division Orchestra, which is a mixed Arab-Israeli orchestra set up by Palestinian historian Edward Said and Israeli conductor Daniel Barenboim, to play in cities across Switzerland to show really how music can unite people, forwarding a positive message. This would not only show how music unites people, of course, but it would also show an awareness that these conflicts exist and that the contest is addressing them in one way or another, particularly in a positive way. So that's my thoughts for now on this inevitable or seemingly unfixable clash between universal values and liberal values in the event. And I look forward to hearing your feedback from you live in Basel.